Hello, everyone. This is the last lecture of the academic year, but it's a very important one as we are talking about animal conservation biology. So you have all heard the term endangered species. What is it? What does it mean to be endangered? In danger of what? Well, to be an endangered species means that the species is in danger of extinction. Now, endangered is really just a category of extinction risk. So who categorizes extinction risk? Who's responsible for declaring a species endangered or not endangered? Well, there are various organizations worldwide, also at different organizations in different countries and different government agencies. But I wanted to highlight the work of the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUCN. The IUCN is the world's oldest global environmental organization, as well as the world's largest professional conservation network. And they are involved in the science and the action and the influence of conservation biology. Now, one of the products of the IUCN is the Red List of Threatened Species. And the Red List is the definitive international standard for species extinction risk. The Red List is the most complete scientific knowledge base on the biology and conservation of many species. And it is used to inform, but also not just tell you information, but also it's meant to promote action for biodiversity conservation. So in the Red List, in the scheme of categorizing extinction risk as the various categories are defined by the IUCN, let me explain here that some species are not evaluated, right? I mean, there's more than 1 million species described, and so not all of them are evaluated. Many of them don't have enough data to really make a call about their extinction risk, but some we do, and they are of least concern. They're not going extinct anytime soon. Some species are what are called near threatened, and some are threatened. Well, within the broad category of threatened, some species are vulnerable, and those that are at higher extinction risk are endangered, and those that are at even higher extinction risk are critically endangered. Then beyond that, the species can go extinct in the wild and exist only in captivity. And then the last point of no return is when the species truly goes extinct. Now, last time I checked, these were the numbers of animals. Wait for it. Wait for it. Boom. 799 animals have gone extinct since since we started keeping track of this stuff. Okay, so which is not very long actually. Now let me kind of show you how the Red List looks like. So you can click here on your PDF, Red List, IUCNRedlist.org. And it's going to take us to the website. And here you can learn about all these just random species that pop up on the webpage, but you can search for any animal or plant. Let's say, for example, my favorite animal, the jaguar. All right. So here's the jaguar. I click on it and I get the assessment. All right, so here is a map of where the jaguar's geographic range is. Here I get some information about, okay, so here I get the category, the extinction risk category. It's near threatened. Okay, so it's not technically threatened, it's near threatened globally. However, it has a declining population trend. And then here I can get some details about that. Here it tells me what kind of habitat the jaguar lives, and then I can get more details about that. Here are the threats listed, and I can get some details about how those threats are actually impacting jaguar populations. This is what people are doing to conserve the species. These are conservation actions already in place, listed, and I can get some details about those. And these are things that are still conservation actions that are still needed, and I can get details about those. And what kind of research is still necessary for us to better understand the trajectory of the species, and I can read the details over here. I can also get the taxonomy of the animal, right? So this animal is obviously an animal, a chordate, a mammal, a carnivore, a felid in the genus Panthera. And I can see here that the last formal IUCN assessment was published just very recently in 2017. Okay, so you see there, you get a lot of stuff here, and also you can get a lot of cool a bibliography of primary literature and many different pieces of information about the species. So it's a wonderful website. Anyway, let's go back here. Now I put this together a while ago, but the last time I checked, there were about 10,000 species of plants that were threatened, and roughly this just a little bit more species of animals that were threatened, and I think like 3 protists that were threatened and 6 fungi that were threatened here. Okay, so we break down the animals. So we just take this section and we break it down by phylum. We see that most of the animals that are threatened happen to be chordates. And yeah, there are a bunch of mollusks that are threatened, a bunch of arthropods that are threatened, and then a few of many different phyla that make up this fraction. So I'm going to repeat this bottom graph in the next slide. Here it is. 66% of threatened animals happen to be chordates. However, remember that about 81% of all animals happen to be arthropods. Only about 5% of animals are chordates. So think about that for a moment. 5% of all animals are chordates, yet 66% of all threatened animals are chordates. I'll let you think about why that may be. Well, now let's talk about why threatened species are threatened. What are the major threats? Well, there are basically 5 major threats that are going on worldwide. The first one listed here, overexploitation. We're literally killing the animals directly, right? By hunting them and by fishing them and by poaching them. This is a famous picture here in the bottom right. These men are literally standing on a mountain of skulls of bison. There were bison in the millions in the Great Plains not too long ago, and humans just started hunting them without regulation, thinking, hey, there's so many of them, what's going to happen? And well, the bison almost went extinct from overhunting. Well, the bison got saved. This other bird, on the other hand, did not. This was the most abundant bird in the world, the passenger pigeon. There are accounts of how this bird would form flocks that were so immense that they would blacken the skies as the flock was passing by. People would just shoot them on sight, use them for food, and people thought, well, you know, they're so numerous, they'll never go extinct. Well, they went extinct. Now, for the passenger pigeon, it wasn't just overexploitation. Also, people were starting to cut down their forest habitats, which actually leads me to the next major threat, which is habitat loss. Habitat loss is primarily driven by deforestation, by urbanization, and by desertification. This is an alarming statistic here. 129 million hectares of forest have been lost from 1990 to 2015. 190 million hectares. It's hard to understand the magnitude of deforestation that has been going on only in the last 25 years. So you could just do the math. 129 million hectares in 25 years is about 14,000 hectares per day. Now, to put that into perspective locally here, the Santa Monica Mountains, in which Pepperdine is tucked, forms a unit of the National Park Service. It is the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area, and it is about 63,400 hectares. So essentially, we have been losing the equivalent of the Santa Monica Mountains about every 5 days in forests worldwide. That has been the trend over the last 25 years. Now it's slowing down, but it's still extremely alarming. The other major threat is pollution. When we talk about pollution, we're talking about air pollution, land pollution, and water pollution. Our pollution is winding up in even some of the remotest places on the planet. For example, about 19 billion pounds of plastic are dumped into the ocean every year. I mean, where do you think our plastic goes? A lot of it goes into the ocean, and that stuff doesn't sink. It tends to float. And in some places in the Pacific Ocean, it forms these gigantic masses of these clusters of plastic that are formed by winds and by water currents that tend to congregate the plastics in certain areas. Well, in some of the most remote and pristine and beautiful places on the world are found birds that sometimes die from literally consuming too much plastic. The fourth major threat is invasive species. Non-native plants and animals from other parts of the world that are usually transported by humans by accident or sometimes on purpose to other parts of the world threaten native wildlife and ecosystems. This gruesome picture here shows a Burmese python eating a Florida alligator in Florida in the Everglades. The alligator would normally be the top predator of that ecosystem, but now it is prey for the even larger Burmese pythons that people pretty much put there often because they had the pythons as pets. The pythons overgrew the house, and people just thought, hey, it may not be a bad idea to dump the ginormous python into this swampy area that is the Everglades. Well, it's causing a lot of ecological havoc down there. And then lastly, the fifth and maybe most pervasive of the major threats is climate change. And when we talk about climate change, most people think about global warming, and yes, that is in there, that we are experiencing warmer air and ocean temperatures, but also a suite of other phenomena that are related to climate. For example, we're experiencing a more acidic ocean, we're experiencing altered patterns of precipitation, more extensive droughts, more powerful hurricanes, and usually just a greater fluctuation in weather patterns. But one of the things that many people don't appreciate is that climate change is exacerbating extinction risk for many species and has already been held responsible for causing the extinction of some species, such as the Kauai, a formerly common bird in Hawaii. I'm going to show you a video about the Kauai.
Everywhere there's life, and everywhere there is life, there is song. The planet is singing everywhere. But what's happening is we're killing the voices.
Each year, about 1 in a million species should expire naturally. In the next few decades, we'll be driving species to extinction 1,000 times faster than they should be.
In 100 years or so, we could lose up to 50% of all the species on Earth.
Humans are the driving force of this mass extinction event. We're probably doing it, as rapidly as has ever happened in the history of the planet.
This is a song recording of a male o'o singing on Kauai. He is the last male of a species singing for a female who will never come. And now his voice is gone.
I think the 21st century is perhaps the most important environmental century in the human experience.
What will populate the planet 100 million years from now will be determined by what happens in the next few centuries.
How could life be slipping through our fingers?
It's like having a symphony, and one by one you just pluck each of the instruments out of the orchestra. Do your last voices there, and then it's gone.
All right, that was a short clip from the documentary Racing Extinction, which I recommend. It's an extremely powerful documentary. It ends very hopeful. But anyway, the Kauai o'o is just one of several species that have gone extinct, partly because of climate change and severe weather. In this table, which is published in the first paper that I ever published in 2011, I listed here 19 species that, when I searched the IUCN Red List in 2011, had gone extinct from climate change and severe weather as the primary threat, or as one of the threats. I checked today, I just happened to check the Red List today to see how many species have gone extinct, partly because of climate change and severe weather. So take a guess. It was 19 in 2011. Now in 2019, just 8 years later, it is 30. Okay? So you can go to the IUCN Red List to fact check me, but it was 30 as of today. So one of the things that we have to understand about those 5 major threats, those are the direct drivers that are driving the loss of biodiversity, but they themselves are driven by other things, by what we call indirect drivers. And those are economic and demographic and socio-political and cultural and technological in nature. But essentially they boil down to just 2 things: our demand for food and our demand for energy. Those are the two things that themselves are driving the drivers. So it's important that we pause and think, what can we do to mitigate the threats to animal diversity? Seriously, think about this, not just for the purpose of the class, but think about it because as we discussed earlier this week when Avery Davis came to visit us, this is a moral issue. We are called to preserve biodiversity. And so what can we do to mitigate those threats, right? How can we engage in our economic and demographic and our socio-political, our cultural and religious and our technological institutions? And how can we make decisions about our food and about our energy such that these direct drivers are lessened? I want you to read the 10th chapter of this textbook, Conservation Biology for All. I uploaded the PDF into courses, and I just want you to focus on these 3 sections of the chapter. The sections are titled with this question, but I want you to answer the question, or I want you to understand how the authors of that chapter answer the question, why species extinctions have primacy. And then check out this box 10.1 that discusses the difference between focusing on population conservation versus focusing on species conservation. Pay very close attention to this section 10.2, how fast are species becoming extinct? Stuart Pym, highlighted in the video, said that about one species every 1 million years should go extinct. That's normal according to the fossil record, but I want you to pay attention to how is it that we know we are going through another mass extinction right now? How is our current extinction rates calculated? And lastly, these are some preview questions that can guide your study. These questions are also found in the study guide.